That's it right there, girls. New Earth being created. It's a beautiful thing.
I watched the volcano for probably 20, 25 minutes, and then I was like, it's got to be late, and it's going to be very late when I get back to my car, so it's time to get headed back.
But when Dewey looks for the trail he came in on, he can't find it. Undaunted, he decides to follow the coastline and then cut inland to hit the road where he'd parked his car.
That was the plan.
But just after Dewey sets out,
the moon went down, or clouds came over. Basically, it got quite a bit darker. I think I was walking in less of a straight line. Surprisingly quickly, I hit a different texture of rock. It was, and I didn't know what it was, but instead of being this smooth, crunchy black dough, it was these large, white, crumbling boulders, and incredibly hard to walk on that stuff. If my thinking had been clearer, I think I would have noticed that I've somehow moved to a different topography, a different geography. Something's changed here. But I just didn't know if this was some strange, I'd seen so many strange formations and strange things the lava had done that it didn't occur to me that this was a bad sign.
3 hours later, Dewey thinks he's hugged the coast long enough. By his calculations, he should be only minutes from his car.
Okay, that's gotta be enough.
At the point I thought I've got to be past the end of the road, I turned left to walk inland, expecting to hit the road in my car. That's where things started going badly.
Dewey's taking a terrible gamble. If he misses his car in the darkened moonscape, he'll be heading deep into 300,000 acres of uninhabited volcanic fields.
There was no trail at all. I'm just walking across raw, unmarked lava flows.
After 3 hours hiking inland, there's still no sign of his car. Dewey realizes he's lost. Dewey now knows that one more accident and his situation could quickly change from bad to critical. Worse, it looks as though he's still miles from safety.
I didn't see any signs of humanity at all. Very vast, very alone out there, very alone. Shortly after noon that first day, I really started seeing my thinking go bad. I would get confused that I was seeing terrain I'd seen before. I started wondering if I was walking in circles. I don't think my mind was working that well. I can't explain it, but at least for the first several hours of the day, I remained very stubbornly, foolishly attached to this idea that the road was ahead of me.
But then, Dewey hears something.
I had a helicopter coming straight toward me.
If Dewey's hotel reported him missing, this could be a search helicopter.
Hey! Over here! Hey! Guys!
But he has only seconds to try and get noticed. A mirror attached to his camera bag may be his salvation.
Come on, guys. You can see me. Come on.
There was this grand fantasy that they would see my flickering mirror and come down and pick me up and fly me out, and we'd all go get breakfast.
Hey! Over here! Hey!
But it wasn't playing out that way. When I was out on the lava rock, I was struck by how barren of life it was. There wasn't anything anywhere.
Dewey is bitterly regretting his decision not to bring any water from the hotel. And as the temperature soars beyond 30 Celsius, the furnace-like heat of the lava fields is making him dangerously dehydrated. He's now feeling dizzy and nauseous.
Car should be here. Road.
I don't think my mind's working that well. My priorities switched. I stopped looking for the road. I started looking for water.
Surrounded by dust and rock, it seems like a futile task. But astonishingly, over the next ridge, his luck finally changes. Dewey spots an oasis, which must mean water.
The landscape's incredibly barren, incredibly open, and then there are these little oases of very dense jungle springing up. All of this walking I'd been doing, I'd never seen even a tiny puddle, and so I started crawling into these jungles, hoping to find some water. Inside the jungle, the variety of plant life is just unbelievable. There's trees, there's grasses, there's palms, there's everything you can imagine. And they're growing so closely together, you can't even see or touch the floor. You just bend them over into this suspended net of plants and crawl on top of them.
But just as Dewey gets his first taste of water in nearly 12 hours,
Come on, guys, over here!
like the first helicopter, it doesn't appear to notice him.
Come on!
Throughout the day, several more helicopters pass overhead.
Over here!
But none of them sees him. Dewey starts to realize that they aren't search and rescue helicopters, but are carrying tourists on sightseeing trips to the volcano. Mad with thirst, he's torn between trying to attract their attention and finding life-saving water.
At that point, I started doing schizophrenic back and forth. I would crawl as fast as I could to get out where I could reflect the mirror at them. And then as soon as that didn't work and they were gone, I'd crawl back in again to try to find moisture.
Guys! Come on!
I was really operating in very much a panicked way that was just, it was burning up everything I had. And then I look down and the beads of sweat on my arm are as big as the drops I'm getting. So I'm exerting way more energy and water and moisture than I am actually getting moisture.
I flashed my mirror at probably 12 helicopters today, and not one acknowledged me. I don't think anyone's looking for me.
At that point, I started to get really afraid. I can't do two things at once. I need to find water. I'm going to make it for at least a year without a helicopter, but I'm not going to make it another day without water.
In the small oasis, plants are thriving. But Dewey can only find beads of moisture, not nearly enough to satisfy his raging thirst.
I see this very large drop of water. I'm leaning over to try to reach it, and as I do, I'm supporting myself from falling by pushing on the edge of a tree with my left hand. And I was like, something feels strange. And there's a green moss growing on the side of the tree. I tore some of it off and squeezed it. A trickle of water ran out. I did hold the water in my mouth as a test to see if there was anything acidy or burning that felt like it might be poisonous.
It looks like Dewey's in luck, but he needs to collect more than just a mouthful.
My flashlight batteries were dead. I threw them away, and I started squeezing this moss into the handle of my flashlight. It wasn't exactly, you know, clean, delicious water, but I was pretty happy that I'd actually found it. That gave me some confidence. It improved my thinking and my sense of hope. I don't think I was completely dancing for joy yet, but I was encouraged.
Dewey hasn't eaten in 37 hours. He's starving, but has no idea what's edible and what might be poisonous.
One thing I had been doing is testing some foods to see if they made me sick and see if they were edible. So if I had to stay there for a long time, I would have an idea of what I could eat to survive.
Guess that one's a no.
Starving and exhausted, Dewey desperately needs a good night's rest to regain his strength.
Calm, Jerry.
So I figured I'd better come up with a way to shelter myself.
Dewey's life in the city hasn't prepared him for this. So he must dig deep and develop survival skills.
I found some reeds that I could bend into a dome shape and shove them into the mud, and then pile stuff on top. That afternoon, I made a rudimentary little hut that I could crawl into. It was very, very flimsy.
Proud of his achievements, Dewey decides to tell his daughters.
Hey, Trina, Tara. You always said you wanted a vacation home, so here it is. I just built this shelter, and I'm hoping it's gonna help me survive. These leaves here, they're gonna help me collect water.
In the night, rain begins to fall. A light shower could fill his leaf collectors with life-saving water. But this isn't a shower.
The worst thing about the whole time out there was the nights. The wind cut right through my shelter, and it was just absolutely freezing. It was not well insulated. I hadn't put a door on it. Being in the wind and the rain and bugs crawling on me and not being able to move because I'd knocked down my shelter. That was the hardest thing for me. I shivered the whole night, and it wasn't a mild shiver. I shivered like deep muscle shiver.
The storm has trashed his shelter and overturned his rain catchers.
The third morning, the hunger had set in, the isolation had set in. I'd been shivering all night. I was exhausted. I was injured. I was sore. There was a lot of hopelessness.
To make matters worse, Dewey now makes a shocking discovery.
I had all these shards of pumice or lava rock or whatever it is embedded in my feet. There was some pussiness to it, and there was kind of a reddish line, and it was really sore. Just a constant swollen pressure inside of it. And that's when my idea that I can sit this out, it fell apart. I thought, well, I can sit it out unless I've got gangrene or unless I've got some infection. It felt really real. You know, it felt really right up against the edge of existence at that point.
After more than 51 hours alone, and with no one to share his ordeal, Dewey's turning to his camera more and more.
I hope you guys are proud of me. I ain't no quitter. I ain't no quitter. I got my reflector belt up in the tree. But, as you can see, it ain't doing me no good. Looks like it's just you and me.
Unknown to Dewey, search and rescue helicopters are out looking for him. In the night, local police have found his jeep. But after 3 days, scouring 300,000 acres of volcanic fields, they're starting to think he hasn't survived.
Tired. Real tired. I'm scared.
By morning, Dewey's hit rock bottom, and the infection in his foot is spreading. The pain is excruciating. Any remaining hopes Dewey had of walking off the volcano are gone.
My foot is pretty badly blistered, and I'm pussing. They gotta see me to find me.
His only hope is to make one final attempt to attract the passing tourist helicopters.
Well, I thought if I could build a large fire with a lot of smoke, might actually attract rescuers.
Dewey decides that the lava fields which have held him hostage for 5 days might give him an escape route. If he can use the red-hot lava to ignite a branch, he can start a fire and make a beacon. But to do it, Dewey must brave the volcano's toxic gases. Even brief exposure to concentrated carbon dioxide could kill him.
Rescue me.
I crawled down into one of these volcanic vents and tried to stick a long branch down into where it seemed like it was a hot area.
My son! You son of a...
After just a few minutes choking in the intense heat and smoke, Dewey realizes he's taking a suicidal risk.
There was fumes coming out of there, and I was afraid I was going to pass out.
It's a bitter blow. Tourist helicopters continue to fly by, and Dewey still has no way of attracting their attention.
I came to the conclusion the only way I'm going to be able to get a fire is if I can get a magnifying glass to amplify the sun onto some leaves. The only place I could think to get a magnifying glass was the lens inside of my video camera. The camera was always my companion, someone to talk to, my connection to the outside in a way. Talking to it every day was a solace to me. It was comforting, so I didn't want to smash it.
Before destroying the only companion he's had, Dewey decides to record one final message to his daughters.
I was thinking, you know, this could be the last time my kids hear my voice.
My name is Dewey Gekki, and this is my final will and testament.
I'm realizing how much pain I'm putting my family through, and I just want to say, guys, I'm sorry I was stupid and reckless. I was feeling for my kids if they had to grow up, you know, without me. Trina and Tara, if I don't make it back, guys, I am so sorry. I want you to know I'll always be with you, always be watching over you. It was a pretty emotional process of saying goodbye. If this is my time and place, it's a really beautiful place. But I'm going to do my best to get back to you guys. I'm not quitting. I really love you guys. Bye.
But Dewey does have one slim hope. He thinks that if he can extract the glass lens from inside his beloved video camera, he may just be able to start a fire with it.
I understood that I was taking that film out, putting it in a waterproof case and hanging it on the tree for someone else to find. For somebody to find after I was dead.
Dewey feels that his camera is the one thing that's kept him sane. Destroying it is almost more than he can bear.
But I figured I needed to. I needed to, you know, make the hard choice and try to find a way to stay alive.
To get to the lens, he has to smash the camera. The problem is, he risks smashing the lens too.
I got some big rocks and started trying to break my camera open. I couldn't get anywhere.
The lens just won't come loose.
If I hit it too hard with too big of a rock, I would have crushed the glass, and it was just a painful effort. I heard a helicopter.
But it's yet another tourist group, checking out the volcano, not looking for him.
I decided, well, they're ignoring me. There's no point in getting up and flashing my mirror. it flew right over to me. And I was like, is it possible that they actually saw me this time? And started circling me, and it was at that moment that I totally knew they saw me.
Incredibly, one of the tourists was able to capture on camera the moment of Dewey's discovery.
Yeah, he needs help. He's waving you down.
And it was at that moment I really started crying. I was alive after 5 days. Had this huge kind of release of all the fear and all the desperation I've been kind of keeping somewhat at bay. And it all came busting forth, and I just sat on the ground and I cried and I shook.
Nearly 90 hours after his ordeal began, Dewey was airlifted to hospital, where he was treated for his injuries and severe dehydration. 4 days later, he returned home to Austin, Texas, to be reunited with his daughters.
Absolutely the biggest thing behind my will to live was my kids, wanting to get back to them and not wanting them to have to grow up without a father.
Dewey owed his life to the young, inquisitive tourist who spotted him, Peter Frank.
He said, thanks a lot, you saved my life. And then he asked me for my home phone number and stuff.
And what did you say?
I said, it's cool.
Peter has remained in touch with Dewey, Trina, and Tara ever since. David Whittley is about to head off on an epic journey down the Colorado River.
As early as I can remember, I was off in a little boat rowing around on water. I've discovered that I really, really enjoyed that kind of activity and the beauty and the solitude of the great outdoors.
Well, it looks like I'm going to be the only one on the river. We might as well pull up over there and start unloading.
David has been on a waiting list for a permit for 2 years. But when another raft trip is suddenly cancelled, it opens up the window he's been waiting so long for.
I was living a life of a bachelor and had no particular personal ties that would inhibit me from doing a trip like this.
But while David craves the solitude, the permit has also come in winter, a time when few others dare to take on the river. And this will be his first ever solo journey. David's journey down the Colorado River takes him through the remotest part of the canyon, hundreds of miles from civilization. The journey of nearly 300 miles goes without a hitch, and he soon forgets his earlier apprehension.
And then all of a sudden, your velocity increases dramatically. The sense of acceleration can be disorienting in and of itself. Lava Falls has an actual waterfall, a 14-foot drop. I was terrified. It is readily avoidable if you know what you're doing and pick the right course.
But David is now completely out of control.
I can remember very vividly my boat turning vertical and nosing straight down the falls. I was slammed forward into my ice chest. The boat, for reasons which I still cannot figure out today, bounced back upwards, even though My boat by then was entirely filled with water. It was upright, and I was still in it, and we were still floating. My first recollection that I was in any danger was when I found myself floating directly into these rocks. They're sharp pointed, and they looked like teeth in a dog's mouth. And I was sideways to the current at the time. I knew that was something I really did not want to allow to happen. I did take a powerful stroke with my upstream oar in an attempt to pivot the boat around the rocks. I can't believe this is actually happening. I first thought that my boat will be fine and then it'll pivot itself around and float off of this thing.
But the current has pinned the raft tightly against the rock.
And before I know it, the boat shot up in the air. I was just totally stunned. How can the river be that powerful to shoot this 2,000-pound raft up in the air? I remember, looking down at the water and going, uh-oh, we're in big trouble now. I came up underneath the boat. My head was out of water and I was breathing.
The water is barely 40 degrees, and David knows he must get out fast or he'll freeze to death.
I was concerned that I would become entangled in the raft. I'm wet and I'm cold, and I'm with an upside-down raft. I remember standing up on this upside-down raft with one oar, trying to navigate downriver to get to this sandy alcove, sort of like a Venetian gondolier with his one oar navigating the canals.
But the river is so powerful, it's impossible to steer.
I tend to turn more than the raft when I try and turn the oar.
Swept past the safety of the alcove, he's now hurtling towards the next set of rapids, with no way of navigating his way through it.
There's literally nothing to hang on to. There are no handholds, no toe holds, nothing.
Desperately fighting for breath in the icy river, David's got to hold on to his raft or risk drowning.
And I managed to grab the lifeline around the boat.
But the powerful current drags him and the raft into huge underwater rocks.
It floated up onto the rocks and dragged me over the rocks with the boat.
David is faced with a desperate decision. If he keeps hold of his boat, he'll be smashed into the rocks. If he lets go, he'll lose everything.
My thinking was, if I don't get out of this river, it's going to kill you. So there I am, standing up on this outcropping, watching my boat float away and calling after it, hoping it would come back to me like I was calling after a dog. Come on! I was frightened. I kept hoping that by some bizarre circumstance it would eddy out someplace where I would be able to get to it. And once it disappeared from view, I just go, good God, what am I into now? I realized I was in a pretty serious predicament. There's not even a spot to sit comfortably, much less do anything else. I started, seriously considering what my options were. Do you want to try and hike out of the canyon? Just what are your options?
Trapped at the bottom of steep cliffs, David can see no option but to try to scale the sheer rock wall to safety. It's painfully slow progress. After an hour, he's still only 30 feet above the river.
I'm traversing these rock faces using my toes on little cracks in the rock and using as much caution as I possibly could conceive of due to the fact that I was alone and, any falls would be catastrophic.
But the higher he climbs, the more unstable the rock face becomes.
This dislodged rock decided to roll down onto my foot. It resulted in breaking a couple of toes as this rock landed on my foot. There wasn't anything I could do about it at the time.
Climbing upwards is agony, but the cliff face is too steep to descend. So he has no option but to keep going.
I grab onto a rock. I'm using it as a handhold to work my way around sort of an outcropping, and the rock comes off in my hand. And then I sort of teetered there for a few seconds, minutes, hours, days, lifetimes, who knows. I lost my balance and fell over completely backwards, sliding head first on my back across this rock face, thinking, you're dead, this is it. My life jacket caught on something. It flipped me completely over in a backward somersault. I hit my chin on something hard enough to break 4 teeth, knocked myself entirely unconscious. I found myself in the Colorado River coming up out of the water, spitting teeth out of my mouth. I could see another sandy spot further downstream from me. I'd say a half a mile down from where I was. I knew that just getting myself into this alcove that I could see was going to be a challenge. And I'm probably a good 30 feet above the river, and lo and behold, right in front of my face is a can of beer.
The beer can is the first sign of life he's seen in over 20 days. But he quickly realizes it must have been washed up in floods years earlier.
This beer has been there long enough that the label is just about entirely faded off of it.
Having lost all of his supplies, David knows it could provide a valuable source of energy. David slowly picks his way across the rocks, and 2 hours later, finally reaches the small isolated cove.
By the time I had actually gotten down to the sandy alcove, I'd pretty much dried out and warmed up just from exertion.
Only now does David realize the enormity of his situation. His quest for solitude brought him to the heart of the Grand Canyon. But it's now left him utterly alone, in winter, when he's unlikely to see anyone for months. Surrounded by mountains at the edge of the river, he's completely stranded. He's lost everything. He has no food, shelter, or warm clothing. And David knows he now faces a freezing night ahead.
I was getting down into the 40s at night. I was aware that the most immediate threat to my health and sanity was going to be hypothermia.
With no way to call for help, and all his tools and equipment lost, David knows he must rely on himself and his ingenuity if he's to stay alive. Without food, David's body has no calories to burn to generate warmth, putting him at even greater risk of hypothermia. He needs to keep moving, but fatigue finally overwhelms him.
I woke up and was startled that I had fallen asleep and was concerned and frightened by that. Well, geez, if I let my guard down, I'm not going to make it.
As he faces his third night out in the canyon, the desire to sleep is overwhelming.
It's only me and the moon and the rock formation and the river, and you may be able to see it again tomorrow, and you may not. I really was feeling, really dejected and wondering why I ended up in this situation to begin with.
David is clinging to the hope that by now his friend will have raised the alarm, and tomorrow rescue will arrive. After 4 days fighting to stay alive, it seems a search party has finally come looking for him.
I jumped up and down and waved my arms.
Help! Hey!
You're looking at this plane, and you can clearly see it.
Hey!
I'm wearing a bright red life vest.
Here!
It's just inconceivable that they can't see you.
Hey! Here!
But as the plane banks away, David realizes he's invisible from the air.
Hey! Come back! Come back!
His only hope of rescue
Come back!
has gone. David's ingenuity and determination have helped him survive for 6 days, injured and alone in the Grand Canyon. He expected to be rescued days ago. But now the hostile winter conditions have taken a terrible toll on his body, and he's beginning to lose his mind.
I had all kinds of wild fantasies occurring, you know. The world had been devastated by nuclear explosions, and I was probably the only human left on the planet. Particular incidents or scenes out of my past history would come to the surface of my consciousness.
Hey!
I remember pretty vividly thinking about and remembering events that I had shared with various different friends and so forth, and thinking about them and being sad that, you know, I might not see them again.
Hey!
Now too weak to gather wood or maintain his fire, David's core body temperature is dropping rapidly. He's losing his battle with hypothermia.
My first inkling that something was happening was the noise of the helicopter. Fairly rapidly increased in volume and noise. When the helicopter came around the corner, I was stood up and I was waving my arms and jumping up and down and crying and laughing. And I mean, there was a great sense of relief. And you know, I've never experienced so many emotions all at one time as I did right then. I was laughing because I was so happy to have survived the whole ordeal, and I was crying because I was so grateful for having survived the whole ordeal. It really was an upwelling of emotions that was totally beyond my normal range of experience.
Having discovered David's capsized raft 20 miles downstream, the park authorities had launched a search and rescue mission.
They were amazed to find me still alive. They told me that they were sure they were looking for a body. The pilot had a sandwich that his wife had made for him. It was probably one of the best sandwiches I've ever had in my life.
7 days after his accident, David was finally airlifted to safety. He went on to make a full recovery and is still passionate about rafting.
I never did believe it was my time to die. I do believe that you can enhance your chances of surviving by believing that you are going to survive. My life has changed significantly because of this incident. In some deep spiritual sense, that I have a more positive outlook, and I also think I have a better grasp on what it means to be alive.